More than 70 dead in Uttarakhand, over 25 lives lost in Kerala, and thousands displaced in these states and others. Numbers that are just a fragment of the human cost of the rainfall of an unusual October that wrought huge damage across India this year, while 10 of Uttarakhand's 13 districts recorded between 100 to 500 millimeters of rain. Kottayam and Idukki were the worst hit in Kerala. Behind these extreme weather events were heating of the seas, unfettered growth, and delayed withdrawal of the monsoon, if experts are to be believed. And at their heart were natural habitats and hundreds of communities.
ये तो पहली दफ़े हुआ है, ये 40 साल मेरी एज होगी, 40 सालों में पहली दफ़े ऐसा देख रहा हूँ। उस टाइम तो केवल मौत ही मौत दिख रही थी पूरी। पूरा सैलाब आ गया था, बह के पूरा पानी का सैलाब चल रहा था, पेड़ चल रहे थे, पत्थर बह के आ रहे थे।
हमारा 80 फीट 20 फीट चौड़ाई वाली बिल्डिंग सारी ये नदी में बह गई, जिसमें बगल में कारखाना था, 50 मुर्गियाँ थी, 3 किराएदारों का सामान, और वो भी सब चला गया।
നമുക്ക് കുറ്റപ്പെടുത്താൻ ആരെയും ഒരിക്കലും നമുക്ക് കുറ്റപ്പെടുത്താൻ മനുഷ്യൻ പ്രകൃതിയോട് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു ദുരനുഭവങ്ങളുടെ പ്രതിഫലമായിട്ടാണ് നമ്മളിതിനെ കാണുന്നത്.
As India battles the growing climate change threat, with extreme weather events being witnessed across the country, India's commitment at COP26 and Prime Minister Modi's five-fold strategy, termed as the Panchamrit, declaring India's new climate targets and the target to achieve net zero emissions by 2070, has been hailed by experts. According to a report by the World Meteorological Organization, India lost over $87 million last year due to natural disasters such as tropical cyclones, floods and droughts, similar to the ones witnessed in Uttarakhand and Kerala.
Interesting thing is, most of the rich countries who've caused the pollution, who should have stuck to real zero, according to the original agreement which was killed by Obama in Copenhagen, which should be net negative in order to leave the carbon space for others, they have come up with net zero as the new trick. They talk about net zero by 2050 because by then they'll have the equations in place, the same equations that caused the Wall Street collapse in 2008. No nature, no people, no damage, just money, how to make more money out of a disaster. India resisted net zero and said this is not a scientific term. And it is not a scientific term. It is a financial trickery term. Yet somehow we were bullied and Prime Minister Modi pulled it to 2070. I think India needs to come back to saying net zero is a new financial trick by the extractors of the world, the profiteers of the world, the billionaires of the world. We will do the real work on protecting ourselves from the vulnerability, the real work on reducing our emissions, and finally, the real work that is still needed for climate justice. I think India should go much stronger to the next COP in Egypt.
Uttarakhand falls in the central region of the Himalayas, which means it's on the front lines of climate change. And over the years, locals and experts have observed drastic changes. Crop patterns have shifted, glaciers are shrinking, snowfall is lesser, and rainfall irregular. While the impact is visible on ground, the Himalayan region is among the least monitored, with very little data and research available to establish climate change.
देखिए, फसल में मडुआ, झूंगर, गहत की दाल और भट की दाल, तो ये सब चीज़ें यहाँ पर होती थी। आप देखिए, मडुए का स्तर गिर गया। जहाँ मडुआ पहले 4 कुंटल जिस जगह पे होता था, 5 कुंटल होता था, आज वहाँ पे 10 किलो 20 किलो में आ गया। तो कहीं ना कहीं तो इन सब चीज़ के लिए क्लाइमेट जिम्मेदार है। किस वजह से? इसकी वजह यही है बस क्लाइमेट चेंज।
In 2015, the state launched the climate change, Uttarakhand Climate Change Action Plan, but it remained confined to a document, and as far as I know, there has been no implementation of those of the recommendations that were made. Secondly, how we need to make people aware. It requires education right from the beginning, which the schools at least are doing, but our university system does not bring in the climate change angle. Our bureaucracy, although they are aware, they do not bring in, talk. I mean, environment is the least concern as far as I see from outside of the government or the politicians. As far as data is concerned, we are not very good at maintaining data. We have never been very good at maintaining data. But this could be a start. Himalayas are considered, the Hindu Kush Himalayas, the Indian Himalayan region is considered as a white spot in the global discourse, that we are data deficit region.
और साल के मुताबिक इस बार जो है काफ़ी ज़्यादा सिंधु है ग्लेशियर। तो ग्लेशियर जो है जैसे पंचतनी ग्लेशियर है, बालिंग यक्सी ग्लेशियर है, काफ़ी ज़्यादा, बहुत ज़्यादा, हम लोग कहें तो एक हिसाब से 100 मीटर तक बहुत पीछे, 100 मीटर या 200 मीटर समथिंग पीछे चला गया, श्रिंक होके चला गया। तो हम लोग काफ़ी जगह में देख रहे हैं, उससे जो है काफ़ी कहीं ना कहीं ये ग्लोबल वार्मिंग का ही जो इफेक्ट है, उसी के हम लोग देख रहे हैं। तो उसी से काफ़ी ज़्यादा ग्लेशियर जो है वो पिघलते जा रहा है। तो बेमौसम बारिश हो जा रही है, बेमौसम बर्फ आ जा रही है।
In 2009, we did a Himalayan study on the melting of glaciers. The West put pressure and said to India, deny that the glaciers are melting. Overnight, the claim changed. We denied for 10 years that the glaciers are melting and receding, because one glacier in Karakoram has expanded a little bit. Yes, the glaciers are melting, and our main rivers, the Yamuna and the Ganga, are glacial fed. If these glaciers disappear in the next few decades, we will have 1/3 of India without water in the summer season, when only the glacial melt gives us water. The third pole is the Himalaya. Third pole supplies drinking water and water to 1/2 of humanity.
India is quite vulnerable as compared to many countries to the effects of climate change, with its poorest being the most at risk. We meet Chandan from Garampani, a block in Uttarakhand's Nainital district that witnessed severe rainfall recently. Now, Chandan's wife is a kidney patient, he has 2 school-going kids, and he worked as a carpenter until his workshop along with his entire house was washed away. Now, living in a rented room, he's worried about the future of his family and doesn't know how to rebuild his house.
आप किस चीज़ का काम था आपका?
मेरा फर्नीचर, अलमारी, बॉक्स, ड्रम इत्यादि स्टील फर्नीचर एंड लकड़ी फर्नीचर दोनों का था। अब मैं अभी कोई काम नहीं कर सकता हूँ, मेरे पास कारीगर भी नहीं है, अभी मेरे पास जगह ज़मीन भी नहीं है, कार्यशाला के लिए ज़मीन भी नहीं है, औजार भी नहीं है, मशीन भी नहीं है।
मुझे बताएंगे सर, हम ये जिस जगह पे यहाँ खड़े हैं, यहाँ तक आपका मकान था, तो यहाँ पे क्या था, क्या एरिया था यहाँ पे?
सर यहाँ पर खेत थे, अगल बगल में खेत थे, और हमने तो ऐसा कभी सन 93 में भी आई बाढ़, उसमें भी ऐसा नहीं देखा, 10 में भी देखी, लेकिन ये जो पत्थर है इससे पहले नदी थी, और आज हमारा अब दिमाग काम नहीं कर रहा।
हम सोचेंगे कि कहीं पे बच्चों का कहीं पे पढ़ाई लिखाई करके ये बच्चे कुछ करे, हम लोग को पालने के जरिए कुछ ढूंढे। अभी तो हमें नहीं पालना है ना, लेकिन आप इसके डेट में तो हमारा ना हाथ पैर काम कर रहे हैं, ना ही बीपी लो हो जा रहा, हमेशा दोनों का बीपी लो हो जाता है हम दोनों को। आज की डेट में हमारा दिमाग बिल्कुल भी संतुलन में नहीं है, एक रत्ती नहीं। हम सरकार से कह रहे हैं कि हमें कहीं पे विस्थापित कर दीजिए करके कह रहे हैं, लेकिन ऐसी स्थिति में हम कुछ कर भी नहीं पा रहे, ना ही हमें खाने का होश है, ना कुछ बिल्कुल नहीं, ना बनाने का मन करता है। होपलेस होने को जा रहे हैं हम आज की डेट में।
This is a video recorded by Fawzia and shared with her relatives. Moments after it was shot, a landslide swept Fawzia's house, and she was found dead under the rubble, along with her 7-year-old daughter and 10-year-old son, their bodies in a last embrace. Fawzia's father Nazir is alive. From Kokayar in Kerala's Kottayam district, he has lost 5 family members. Still trying to come to terms with his sense of loss, he says he has never seen such rains.
നമുക്ക് കുറ്റപ്പെടുത്താൻ ആരെയും ഒരിക്കലും നമുക്ക് കുറ്റപ്പെടുത്താൻ ഒക്കില്ല. മനുഷ്യൻ പ്രകൃതിയോട് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു ദുരനുഭവങ്ങളുടെ പ്രതിഫലമായിട്ടാണ് നമ്മളിതിനെ കാണുന്നത്. എൻ്റെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ ഇത്രയും പ്രായത്തിനിടയ്ക്ക് ഇതുപോലൊരു ദുരനുഭവം, ഇതുപോലൊരു മഴയും എൻ്റെ ജീവിതത്തിനിടയ്ക്ക് ഇന്ന് വരെയും ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുമില്ല, കണ്ടിട്ടുമില്ല. ഇതുപോലെ വെള്ളപ്പൊക്കവും മഴയും ദുരന്തവും എൻ്റെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ ഇന്ന് വരെയും കണ്ടിട്ടില്ല. ഇത് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ ആദ്യമായിട്ട് കാണുന്നത്.
Another house in Mundakayam, a town in Kottayam, slid into the Manimala river. For Pushpa, whose husband is a driver, the house meant her only life savings. This woman, a widow, works as a domestic help to feed herself and her family. sitting in the flattened land that was once home. She breaks down, recalling the dreadful rains, and doesn't really know how to find another accommodation for her family.
We have not learned from our previous disasters that have happened, especially if I take reference from the Kedarnath tragedy that has happened. We have not learned from that tragedy. तो अगर देखा जाए जब भी कोई नेचुरल हैज़ार्ड आता है या नेचुरल कैलामिटी होती है तो वो अपने साथ सारी चीज़ें तो ख़त्म करती ही है, एक साथ वो एक सिविलाइजेशन को भी, एक सोसाइटी अपना जिस तरह से अपने आप को सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइज की होती है वो उसको भी डिस्ट्रॉय करती है. वन नीड्स टू अंडरस्टैंड कि नेचुरल कैलामिटी वो एक डिज़ास्टर तभी बनती है जब वहाँ पे ज़िंदगियाँ होती हैं या लाइफ होती है. वहाँ पे अगर इस तरह की लाइफ नहीं होगी, रिस्क नहीं होगा, तो इस तरह का वल्नरेबिलिटी नहीं होगी कम्युनिटी की, प्लस इस तरह के डिज़ास्टर इस फॉर्म में नहीं होंगे जिस फॉर्म में हम अभी देखते हैं कि व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट डिज़ास्टर्स वी टॉक अबाउट लाइव्स दैट दीज मेनी पीपल्स डाइड. So this should not be there.
The Himalayas as a mountain system has experienced earthquakes, landslides, avalanches, cloudbursts, forest fires and floods. The human contribution to many of these disasters is well established. The controversial Char Dham project in Uttarakhand, concretization of the Nainital Lakes catchment, and many similar projects. Inappropriate development methods, building of roads, dams, tunnels, unregulated tourism and migration. They are all part of the Himalayan tragedy.
Our development strategy still remains very concrete based. It is heavily engineering based, which are not suitable for the Himalayan region. If you look at the 2013 tragedy, we should have learnt a lesson about what our development strategy should have been. Secondly, if you look at the kind of development that is happening, for example, the building of roads, or other infrastructure, it is not suitable for the fragile Himalayas. We are young, growing, and still very, very dynamic in nature. So we have to have bespoke solutions for Himalayas. We have to have solutions which align with the nature. So development, of course, is required, but what kind of development is required? We cannot have the Gurgaon style development. We cannot have the development that takes place in Delhi in the Himalayan region.
We have known this from the beginning that India is the most vulnerable. India led the negotiations to create a UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in 1992. I was there with our ministers and they said, stop this genocide. The genocide is continuing and those who have caused the ecocide and genocide are playing new tricks now to make new money out of pollution. Every false proposal, maybe not in the formal treaty, but on the side agreements, the agriculture agreement between the US and the Saudi Arabia on aim for climate, or the net zero juggling by the banks who've caused crisis after crisis after crisis since 2008. Are now going to solve the climate crisis. So the tragedy is the Earth's crisis has been hijacked by the same institutions.
देखिए, क्लाइमेट चेंज के लिए कहीं ना कहीं हम लोग जिम्मेदार हैं, कहीं ना कहीं विकास भी जिम्मेदार है. प्रॉपर अगर 2010 से देखा जाए ना, अल्मोड़ा वाली रोड 2010 से अभी तक लगातार बन रही है. अब नेशनल हाईवे इसको चौड़ीकरण में ले लिया नेशनल हाईवे ने, तो चौड़ीकरण में अभी हमारा ये वाला पार्ट भी होना है. अभी तो अल्मोड़ा वाला काकड़ी घाट से आगे वाला हो रहा है और काकड़ी घाट तक हो चुका है. खैरनाथ से अभी जोलीकोट तक होना है. ये तो चौड़ीकरण होगा तो मशीनें लगेंगी, पोकलैंड बड़ी बड़ी मशीनें लगेंगी, उससे पहाड़ दरकेंगे. ये नुकसान हमें बरसात में दिखता है. बरसात में पानी पड़ता है पहाड़ पे तो वो मलबा सहित पत्थर सहित सब नीचे रोड पे लेके आता है. 2010 से तो मैं लगातार देख रहा हूँ कि 5 या 6 बार बन गई हुई अल्मोड़ा वाली रोड. और रानीखेत वाली रोड सबसे पुरानी रोड है, उसमें नुकसान बहुत कम होता है. तो कहीं ना कहीं हमारा जो सरकारी तंत्र है, तरीके से स्टडी वाली बात है, सर्वे नहीं हो पाता, प्रॉपर तरीके से सर्वे नहीं होता किसी चीज़ का, वो भी चीज़ें सब रहती हैं इसमें.
It is time to stop calling a violence against the earth development. Development is a biological terms. The development is when a seed becomes a tree. The World Bank invented the word development to keep the third world colonized. They said, you are underdeveloped if you're not using fossil fuels. You're underdeveloped if you're not using pesticides. You're underdeveloped if you're not using plastics. And every step they have defined a development to colonize us. what they've done to the mountains. The landslides are a result of new borrowings, new indebtedness, and a new violence to not listen to the Himalaya, that this Dev Bhumi, this land of Char Dhams, is the most sacred part of this country because it is the lifeline of India. We do need to stop using words of colonization. We need to start becoming independent in the mind. We have other words. Vikriti is what's happening. The Sanskrit word for destruction and degeneration is not the same as creation.
Be it the Himalayan region or any other fragile area, unregulated development tends to leave behind a trail of disasters. In its wake, it also leaves behind tales of survival, sadness and hope, and hundreds of untold stories. Climate change certainly puts India at risk, but the man-made factors cannot be ignored. Development, while tackling climate change, remains a big challenge. However, what humans and the planet needs is a more sustainable lifestyle and genuine efforts for climate change mitigation. The words of Girda Girish Tiwari, Jankavi, a prominent writer and social activist from Uttarakhand, sum it up.
धुंग बेचो मट बेचो बेची खे बजानी लिश खोपी खोपी मेरी उधेड़ी दिखाल न्योली चाचरी ज्वाला छपेली बेचा म्यारा बेची दी अरड़ो पानी ठंडी बयार.
The subscription model is something that keeps News Laundry afloat, but we need hundreds of thousands of people to completely transform the news ecosystem. So you pay for news, so it serves you. So click on the link with this video, subscribe to News Laundry and pay to keep news free, और गर्व से कहो मेरे खर्च पर आज़ाद है खबरें.